All right, so today we're diving deep into a world of, uh, microscopic villains and epic battles.
Oh, this sounds intense.
It is, and all this action is happening right under our noses.
Hmm. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
We're talking about hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Ah, yeah, those pesky childhood rashes. I've seen those.
Right, exactly.
Right.
But what if I told you that there's a whole lot more to this common ailment than just those rashes?
Okay. You've got my attention now. What else is there?
Well, the sources you sent over have really gotten me hooked.
Yeah.
And trust me, you'll be fascinated too.
Well, it is kind of amazing how something so seemingly simple can actually be this whole complex web.
I know, right?
It's like virology and immunology, and you even get global health dynamics all wrapped up in this one thing.
And it just goes to show, how much we still have to learn.
Oh, absolutely. Even about stuff we think we know, like these common childhood illnesses.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we've got this stack of research articles,
Oh.
some clinical observations, and even some historical accounts. So what's our mission? Well, we're going to peel back the layers of this, quote unquote, simple childhood illness
Okay.
and reveal just how surprisingly complex it really is.
I love it. It's like a journey, you know?
Yeah.
Starting with those like old clinical notes from puzzled doctors and ending up in these high-tech labs where scientists are like decoding this intricate dance between the viruses and the human body.
I like that analogy. So let's rewind the clock.
Okay.
Let's go way back to the early days. Picture this. You've got doctors scratching their heads over these weird little blisters popping up on kids' hands, feet, and in their mouths.
Right.
And back then, it was so mild that most people didn't even know what it was called.
Really?
Yeah. But the question is, was it truly harmless? Or was something more going on underneath?
It makes you wonder, right? Like, were they just dismissing it because it was so common and so mild, or is there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface?
Well, that's exactly what those early researchers were trying to figure out. They saw these clusters of symptoms, but they couldn't quite pinpoint the cause.
And I bet it was frustrating. It's like it was hiding in plain sight, almost too obvious to be considered a real threat.
Right. And then, boom, enter the enteroviruses.
Enteroviruses.
A whole family of these microscopic troublemakers.
Yeah.
And that discovery, I think, really changed everything.
Oh, for sure. Finding out it was these tiny RNA viruses, they're notorious for causing a whole range of infections.
Especially in kids.
Especially in kids, yeah. That was a turning point. It shifted the focus from just describing the symptoms to actually understanding what was causing them.
So suddenly it wasn't just about the blisters. It was about the virus itself. How it spread, how it interacted with our immune systems, and why some outbreaks seem to hit harder than others.
And the deeper they dug, the more they realized that these enteroviruses, they weren't just one big bad guy.
Right.
They were this whole diverse group, each strain with its own little genetic quirks, its own, you can almost say, personality.
So it's like instead of one big bad wolf, we've got a whole pack of them, each with its own hunting style, its own way of interacting with those unsuspecting villagers, which in this case are ourselves.
I love that analogy. And, this diversity, that's key to understanding why hand, foot, and mouth disease can look so different from case to case.
Right.
So you've got some strains, like Coxsackie virus A16, they tend to cause those, like, classic mild cases.
Right, the ones most people think of.
Exactly. But then you've got others, like Enterovirus 71.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
And they've gotten a reputation for causing more serious problems.
So we've got these different strains, each one capable of causing a range of symptoms from mild to severe. But we can't forget about the other side of this story.
True.
The human body and its amazing defense system.
Right. It really is remarkable when you think about it. Our immune system is this complex network of cells and processes.
All working constantly.
All working constantly, yeah. To protect us from invaders like these viruses. It's like this never-ending story of, surveillance, rapid response, and even this incredible memory.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. It allows us to learn from our past encounters and be ready for whatever comes next.
But sometimes that memory can be a little faulty, or the enemy, can outsmart us.
And that's when things get really interesting.
Right. That's when things can get messy.
You're right. It's a delicate dance between the virus and the immune system. Sometimes it's like a graceful waltz leading to a quick and easy recovery.
But other times.
Other times it's more like a chaotic tango, full of missteps and unexpected turns.
And those missteps, those moments of, imbalance are what can lead to those more severe atypical presentations of hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Yeah, we're not just talking about the typical blisters and discomfort anymore. We're talking about cases that go beyond that.
Cases that might even look like other conditions.
Exactly. which can make diagnosis a real challenge.
So while that classic presentation is pretty easy to spot,
Yeah, those blisters on the hands, feet, and mouth.
the atypical forms can be trickier.
We're talking about cases with more widespread rashes, unusual blister formations, even those rare instances where the virus actually manages to break through the body's defenses,
And causes those complications.
affecting the nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can get serious.
So it's definitely not as simple as we might initially think.
Definitely not. And as we dig deeper into how this illness actually shows up, you'll see just how diverse and intriguing these manifestations can be.
All right, you've definitely piqued my curiosity.
Yeah.
I'm ready to dive into those clinical signs and symptoms.
Let's do it. So let's imagine what happens when one of these tiny viruses gets into a child's body.
Okay.
You know, picture it like hitching a ride on a toy at daycare or just, sneaking in on unwashed hands.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely see that happening.
Right. And then it has to navigate this whole microscopic jungle of cells,
Wow.
looking for just the right spot to get in.
So it's not just like a random invasion. This virus actually has a plan.
Oh, absolutely. These enteroviruses, they've evolved over time to target certain types of cells, especially the ones lining the intestines and the skin.
Huh.
Yeah. They attach to these receptors on the cell surface,
Okay.
almost like a key fitting into a lock, and then bam, they're in.
Sneaky little buggers.
Yeah.
But our bodies aren't just going to sit there and take it right.
Oh, of course not. The second that virus gets into a cell, the alarms start going off.
What happens?
Well, the infected cell, it releases these chemical signals,
Okay.
like little distress flares, calling for backup.
So like a microscopic neighborhood watch.
Exactly. Everyone be on the lookout. There's a virus on the loose.
I love it. So that's the innate immune response.
Yeah.
The body's first line of defense.
Right. It's that initial rapid response to any kind of threat.
Okay, so the alarm bells are ringing. The neighbors are all warned. What happens next in this microscopic battle?
Well, think of it this way. The first responders arrive on the scene.
Okay, who are they?
These are the interferons.
Interferons.
Yeah, they're like these special proteins that act like, cellular Paul Reveres.
The virus is coming.
Oh, boy.
The virus is coming.
Exactly. They're trying to slow down the spread of the virus while the body gets its more specialized defenses ready.
So the interferons are buying some time for the big guns to arrive.
You got it. That's when the adaptive immune response kicks in.
All right, this is what I've been waiting for. Tell me about this adaptive response.
Well, this is where things get really targeted and specific to the virus that's attacking.
Okay, I'm picturing like these microscopic soldiers with tiny little weapons.
Not a bad image. Actually, we're talking about B cells and T cells.
B cells.
These are the highly specialized immune cells that are the real stars of the show.
Okay, and what do they do?
So the B cells, they're like the intelligence officers. They produce antibodies, which are like these guided missiles
Wow.
programmed to seek out and destroy that specific virus.
So antibodies are like the smart bombs of the immune system.
Exactly. And then you've got the T cells.
What about them?
They're more like the ground troops.
Yeah.
You've got helper T cells, which are kind of like the strategists coordinating everything. And then cytotoxic T cells. Those are the real warriors. They directly attack and destroy the infected cells, stopping the virus from making more copies of itself.
It's an epic battle going on at a scale we can't even see.
I know, it's pretty amazing. But how does all of this microscopic warfare actually translate into the symptoms that we see with hand, foot, and mouth disease?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like, how do we get from cells and viruses to those blisters?
Well, remember those signature blisters we talked about?
Of course.
Those are actually a result of this battle between the virus and the immune system.
Really?
As the virus infects cells in the skin and the mucous membranes, the immune system rushes in to fight back.
Okay.
And that causes inflammation and those fluid-filled lesions that we call blisters.
So the blisters aren't actually caused by the virus itself. It's the body's reaction to the virus.
Exactly. It's like a battlefield marked by the scars of war. But here's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, tell me.
Remember all those different strains of enterovirus?
Yeah, we talked about Coxsackie virus A16 and enterovirus 71.
Right. Well, they can actually trigger different levels of immune response, which helps explain why some kids get hit harder than others.
So a more aggressive strain of the virus might trigger a more intense immune response.
Exactly. And that could lead to a more severe case of hand, foot, and mouth disease.
That makes sense. But I guess it's not just about the virus, right? It's also about the person who's infected.
Absolutely. You're right. It's also about the host, the individual child, and their own immune system.
So some kids might just have a naturally stronger immune response.
Right, and they can fight off the infection more quickly.
while others might have a weaker response, which could lead to more problems.
It's like this tug of war between the virus and the immune system.
And the outcome depends on who's stronger.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Sometimes the immune response itself can actually become part of the problem.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, in some cases, the inflammation that's triggered by the immune system, it can be excessive.
Oh, wow.
Like it's almost doing more harm than good.
So the body's attempt to fight off the infection can actually backfire.
You got it. That's one of the reasons why some kids might develop those atypical presentations of hand, foot, and mouth disease.
With those more severe or widespread rashes.
Exactly. It's not just about the virus winning or losing, it's about finding the right balance.
The right level of immune response.
Right enough to fight off the infection, but not so much that it causes more damage.
It's a delicate balance.
It is, especially in young children whose immune systems are still developing. It's this constant dance between attack and defense, this interplay between the virus and the host.
This is so fascinating. It's amazing to think about everything that's happening at this microscopic level.
It really is, and it just goes to show the incredible complexity of our immune systems.
Right.
Even a seemingly simple illness like hand, foot, and mouth disease reveals this whole remarkable story of adaptation defense and this really delicate balance.
So we've gone from those early doctors who were puzzled by these symptoms to this whole microscopic battlefield with viruses and immune cells.
It's quite a journey.
But we're not quite done yet, right?
Yeah.
We still need to connect all of this back to what's actually happening in the real world.
You're right. We need to see how all these microscopic events translate into the actual experience of this illness.
What are the signs that parents and caregivers should be looking out for?
Okay, let's shift our focus from the microscopic to the macroscopic, from that cellular battlefield to the clinical presentation of hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Because ultimately, it all comes down to what we're actually seeing in these kids.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm ready to see how all of this plays out in the real world. Let's talk clinical signs. So let's talk about what parents are actually seeing when their kid gets hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Okay.
We've gone over the virus, the immune response, all those microscopic battles, but what's it actually look like?
Right. Well, the typical case is pretty easy to spot.
Yeah.
It usually starts with a fever, maybe a sore throat, and just feeling kind of blah.
Wow.
And then you get those classic blisters.
The telltale sign?
Exactly. They're small, kind of oval-shaped with a grayish center and that red ring around them.
I've seen those.
And they pop up, on the palms of the hands, the soles of the feet, inside the mouth.
Right. But we've been talking about how it's not always so simple.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. The classic presentation is definitely the most common.
Right.
But there are a bunch of other ways it can show up, and those can be trickier to diagnose.
So like what kind of variations are we talking about?
Well, some kids might get a rash that covers way more of their body.
Oh.
Like their buttocks, arms, legs.
Mm,
Others might get these bigger fluid-filled blisters.
those sound kind of scary.
Yeah, they're called bulo, and they can definitely freak parents out.
I bet. And I remember reading about those cases where the rash can look like something else entirely,
Oh, absolutely.
making it even harder to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, sometimes it can resemble eczema herpeticum, especially if the child already has eczema,
Mhm.
and some cases even mimic Giannotti-Crosti syndrome.
So it's almost like hand, foot, and mouth disease is a chameleon,
They're right.
changing its appearance and keeping doctors on their toes.
You got it. And that's why it's so important for doctors to really examine the child
Yeah,
and get a good understanding of their medical history and any potential exposures.
makes sense.
And sometimes they might even need to do lab tests just to confirm it's really enterovirus and not something else.
So we've got all these different ways it can look.
From mild to kind of wild.
But the good news is that most of the time, hand, foot, and mouth disease is pretty harmless, right?
That's right. For most kids, it goes away on its own in a week or two.
No lasting effects?
Nope. The immune system does its job, the virus gets cleared out, and everything heals up.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
It is. But, of course, we can't forget about those rare cases where things do get more serious.
Where are the complications?
Like those neurological complications we talked about earlier.
Those are pretty scary, even though they don't happen very often.
Yeah, you're right. It's a reminder that we always have to be cautious.
So in those cases, the virus can actually spread to the central nervous system,
Yeah.
causing meningitis, encephalitis, even paralysis.
It's serious stuff.
So what causes those complications? Is it just bad luck, or are there certain things that make them more likely?
Well, it's usually a combination of factors.
Like what?
Certain strains of the virus, like enterovirus 71, are definitely more likely to cause neurological problems.
Uh-huh.
A weaker immune response can also increase the risk.
Makes sense.
or even a super strong inflammatory response.
Right, they can backfire.
Exactly. And of course, any underlying health conditions the child might have can play a role too.
So it's like this perfect storm.
Kind of right. You've got viral factors, host factors, maybe even some environmental factors all coming together.
And that's why it's so important for doctors to be on the lookout for any red flags.
For sure. Especially things like high fever that won't go down, neurological symptoms, trouble breathing.
Catching those early can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Early recognition and prompt medical attention are key.
This has been such an interesting deep dive.
I know, right?
We went from thinking of hand, foot, and mouth disease as this simple rash to this whole complex world of viruses and immune responses and all these different ways it can show up.
It's amazing how much we learn just by digging a little deeper.
It really is. And it just goes to show that even something as seemingly common as hand, foot, and mouth disease can be full of surprises.
And it highlights how important it is to stay curious, to keep asking questions, and to always try to understand the world around us better.
Even the microscopic world that's happening inside us.
Exactly.
Well said.
Huh.
To all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into hand, foot, and mouth disease.
It's been fun.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay healthy.